feel like Kobe in the fourth
This
quarter.
is the Dane Moore NBA podcast, brought to you by the Genesis Company, coming at you, what is it, Thursday afternoon. It's October 19th, and on today's show, we are going to preview the guards. 2 weeks ago, Britt and I did the bigs, which was Kat, Rudy, Naz, Garza, and Leonard Miller. So if you want to listen to that, that's back in the feed there somewhere. Last week, we did the wings. Jaden McDaniels, Kyle Anderson, Troy Brown Jr., Josh Minot, Matt Ryan, and Jalen Clark. And then today we're going to do the guards, which is Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, Jordan McLaughlin, Shake Milton, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Wendell Moore Jr. Britt, before we get, let's start with Ant, but before we get into Ant,
Sure.
I've been thinking, I think you were there at practice last week. I asked Finch, what do you want the identity of the guards to be? I don't know if you remember this answer, but he rattled for a minute plus defense, all these different iterations of defense, from rebounding to point of attack defense to rotations, to all this sort of stuff. And frankly, I wasn't anticipating that,
Right.
I guess that's been a more global surprise to me through training camp, is how dialed this team is on defense. I guess I don't totally look at this guard group, and they got some solid defenders in there, but you got Jaden McDaniels at another position, who's one of your best defenders, Rudy Gobert, probably your best defender. I found that interesting. What do you take from that Finch, with this guard position, cares so much about defense?
Well, I think he's trying to lead them to a harder road, which is always what a coach needs to do in terms of emphasis. I think if you look at this roster, they clearly have the capability of scoring a lot of points. I mean, Ant and Kat alone are, two of the top dozen most explosive scorers in the NBA. So, and then, Mike Conley has been somebody who has been able to lead, potent offenses in his time. And, you've got some other people. Naz Reid can score. Kyle Anderson can score, and yet they finished bottom 10 in offense and top 10, just barely, but top 10 in defense. But I also think that there's a negotiation that is an unspoken negotiation between Rudy Gobert and the Timberwolves. I think maybe it's just me, obsessing on this. I just think it's so important that Gobert is bought in all the myriad ways he needs to be bought in. And I think if he thinks that the whole deal is about defense in some respects, which is right up his alley, then I think he'll be more amenable to being on board with all the things he's going to have to do to adjust. And I also think that if it was offensive leaning into, the fact that he's kind of being de-emphasized on offense this year would be kind of a slight to him.
Right.
So I don't think it's all political or pseudo-psychological, but I do think that there's a part of it that Finch is emphasizing defense because, first of all, there are some extreme upgrades. I mean, losing D'Angelo Russell and bringing in Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is like getting 2 B+ to A- defenders for 1 C- defender. I mean, it's an enormous upgrade.
Right.
And then on the other hand, if you look at the front court, having Kat there a lot and having Naz signed long-term are a little bit of a downgrade defensively compared to probably most of the people who fulfilled those slots, during most of the season, Kyle Anderson in particular. But so I think that emphasizing the guards and emphasizing defense in the guards is probably a good idea.
Yeah, no, I like the Rudy take. I think that makes sense because the thing I really agree with from that is I do sense a de-emphasis on Rudy Gobert offensively. He is still a max player on your team. So if you're going to slide him into offensive an offensive role player role,
Right.
which is probably a good idea for this group.
Absolutely.
You need to maximize him elsewhere. And that's even outside of kind of the political, psychological stuff, which I think that stuff's, I mean, that it's real in the NBA. I don't know if that specific thing is real, but it's not like it wouldn't be the first time that is something that's true behind the scenes, and an accommodation a coach makes accordingly. And yeah, you are just right to like, we do the Conley over D'Lo thing all the time. And frankly, like what surprised me about Mike is how good offensively he was, because I know everybody was kind of hard on D'Lo or done with D'Lo at that time, but D'Lo was having a really good offensive year.
Yes, he was.
Mike didn't have a drop off in offense. I mean, it was a different type of offense, but was also a very productive offensive player. Plus the fact that he's just a more nuanced and physically capable, I think, defender than D'Lo was. That's the win, right? You get that. You get the cherry on top of the sundae, and then Nickeil Alexander-Walker's the sprinkles there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is you constantly had to worry about D'Lo on defense, as the Lakers are discovering, as many other teams have discovered. It
as the Hawks do with Trae Young or any of those.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's not an outlier awful defender, but I would say
Mike isn't that, and Nickeil isn't that. Like,
and not only that, but if you don't have to worry about a matchup at one end of the court, that is an enormous positive. Yeah. And to lean into that a little bit, maybe set the example that, you're talking to Ant as much as anybody if you're talking guards. And so what does Ant need to do? Ant needs to pay attention on defense. That's all. I mean, Ant can play defense. We've seen it over and over again. Yeah. Can he pay attention on defense? Can he focus on defense to the extent that, it is going to be something semi-reliable? When I'm thinking about doing my season preview, I'm thinking about, given my length restrictions, I'm going to think about, X factors. And one of my X factors is going to be Anthony Edwards' sustained focus. Mm-hmm. And that, again, I mean, so there's so many ways that Finch's comment play into what you need from this team, how you need to motivate Rudy on the one hand and Ant on the other hand, two very different types of motivations. And yet that answer he gave kind of covers both bases.
Right. I have that down in my notes with Anthony Edwards too, the defensive element of the paying attention part of it. Let's jump into Ant.
Sure.
Year 4 for Ant. He just turned 22 this summer, averaged 25, 6 and 4 last season, shot 37% from 3, 51% from 2. I looked at some of the more advanced numbers, graded out as an 84th percentile offensive player, according to estimated plus minus, 87th percentile as a defensive player. Overall, that was 89th percentile as a player, which you kind of like start running through some of that, given that he played a bunch of minutes. According to those numbers, he generated the 30th most wins in the league last year. I was like, yeah, that's probably about right.
And according to those numbers, he is a better defender than he is offense, which is
So that's what I was thinking about it, because I'm thinking about this through the context of like, all right, numbers say 30th best player in the league last year. I'm with that. That sounds about right. And the thinking is this season, right? Ant making the leap from 30th best player to
15.
That's what I wrote down too, and my question is, to make that leap, what are the areas in which Ant needs to, make strides and step up? And this kind of sounds like a bad thing, but I made a pretty long list, which actually is an opportunity of a lot of ways to kind of trim some fat there to make that leap up there. But it's not a sexy one. But the first one I wrote down is being a better and more disciplined defender, because I do not think he was the 87th percentile defender.
Not even close. Yeah. Not even close. What you can say about Ant, and you can say it about both ends of the ball, but you can say it more distinctively about the defense, is that he can rise to the occasion and give you something that very few players can give you. He can be a lockdown defender on a great offensive player. That is rare. And I will say that lockdown defenders on great offensive players make it work maybe 45% of the time. That's still incredibly good, you know. But he also is below average in the NBA. Among all the players in the NBA, if you're talking about peripheral vision and knowledge of when to rotate and knowledge of when you're going to run into a screen and knowledge of when to switch, how to box out, all the things that go into defense, he simply fuzzes out sometimes. He doesn't do what he's supposed to do. He makes a poor decision, or he lets the game make the decision for him, which oftentimes means that he's at a disadvantage. And so
you're at the play. I think this is important to pin down here. You are of the mind that this is a bug of his defensive aptitude, not necessarily a feature, right? That these are things that could be removed over time. And
I mean, is Ant going to become only what he is? It's possible, if only
defensively.
If only it's because he doesn't have enough energy, or he is satisfied internally with the level he's providing, and it's just another level away from like Steve Kerr reminding him he could be a better player and he never knew it before. I mean, maybe he needs to be reminded again at this level to become a better defender somehow. But I think he will improve, if only because I think there'll be more meaningful games.
I like that.
And again, if Ant is challenged by the situation, whether it is the size of the game or the caliber of the opponent, you'll see him play better basketball. That's just 100%. Who he is. And that I'd rather have that than the other way. I'd rather have that than a guy who shrinks from big moments and big challenges and, is great, gives you 40-point wins over the Pistons instead of losses. But I do think that there's no reason why Anthony Edwards can't be both. What I chafe at a little bit is he's already assumed to be on his way to both by the national media, who ignored him for the first 2.5 years, embraced him so fully in the last half of the third year and the summer in the world basketball that suddenly it's the needle has gone the other way. And the bottom line is we've seen this guy, every step of the way. And we know when he's been fabulous and why he's been fabulous a lot more than people who just see the highlights.
Sure.
But I would say on average, if you grade out all defensive possessions, Ant right now is about a B- defender. Yeah. I don't think he's a C+ defender. I think he's better than average, but not solidly good. And I think he can be a B+ / A- defender. I think he can be in like Paul George immediately after the injury territory. Sure. I don't know if he can ever be Paul George before the injury territory, but I think he can be very, very good as a defender.
This might surprise you, but I think there's one area and a pretty big area where he's already an A defensively. Okay. And I've been hard on
ball
for it's situational. It's an on ball in a situation where a screen isn't coming. There was a play against New York where like he's on Julius Randle, and it's like not really the corner. It's like right at the break, right? So it's kind of like that angle drive situation. You're not gonna catch a screen there, and it's just Julius Randle's like, all right, I got like 20 pounds on you and 4 inches. Like this seems like a profit situation for me to isolate. It's not like that. Ant against those big wings, like he can guard and will take the bump, move his feet. He is an A at that,
He's
I
a
think
fullback,
already.
which is precisely why Finch keeps on wanting him to draw fouls.
Yes.
Because he could be Jimmy Butler-esque. That's what Butler does. Butler is very similar size, and I mean, Butler's got 2 or 3 inches on him, but they're, the proportions, and Butler just incorporates his body a lot more in his game than Ant does. And I don't think Ant would suffer if he became just like Butler. But if he had a little bit more Butler in him, just in terms of coaxing fouls, I mean, Ant's hesitations are often figuring things out rather than conning people into committing in a way that they don't want to commit.
Sure.
And if he can change that, if he can become a little shrewder, more conniving, then I think he can draw fouls. And the reason is because he's got the strength to take the contact and make it look good. I mean, you need to get hit to get the whistle. Right. And if you're inviting the hit and then going into the hit, you're going to get the whistle.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, it's the physicality, right? Obviously, right, exactly. You don't need to have watched every Anthony Edwards game to know that element of it, but you might, if you don't watch Anthony Edwards all the time, you might like presuppose that he's already really, really tapping into that physicality and athleticism, when in many ways there's a lot more, to get to. And I think it does, start on the defensive side of the floor there, where he can use it in those situations. What I also wrote down for Ant and what it takes to make this leap or whatever is remain a great playmaker for his teammates. I don't think people fully understand that Ant is already a very good playmaker. What he is not good at in playmaking is throwing the ball to Rudy, which distorts, and I just talk to people like around the league and other sort of things, and they Ant naturally comes up. I so rarely hear people talking about him as a playmaker, and the amount of clean shots he generates his teammates, particularly, on the perimeter, in the attention he gets and kicks out in that sort of way. I mean, he had really, really good, like a really good assist rate last season. Like the numbers back this up too. We just remember the flashbulb moments of when it looked so bad, which was pretty much every time he threw to Rudy the ball last year. I think he only had 21 or maybe it's 23 assists to Rudy last season.
I think that a lot of this has to do with the fact that Ant makes the basic play. It's a smart play. He doesn't make fancy passes. I mean, the fanciest stuff Ant will do is skip passes. Occasionally.
I love those though.
Yeah, no, those are great. But I mean, they're still the classic Ant assist is either a drive and kick or a drive and like a interior bounce pass to the nail or something.
Like a drop off.
Exactly.
Not a lot.
A drop off. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think that that ties into me with a real area for growth is Ant in that in-between range, I call it, right? The floater range, the decision-making getting downhill to the rim, the throwing the lob to Rudy or actually taking the floater himself. And
that's what Finch thinks he needs the most work on.
And he does. He does. That's not
that and getting rid of the mid-range. Finch wants him, getting rid of,
But that's the thing is he looks like a great mid-range player. Yeah. Because there's some incredible mid-range shots that he takes, but he shot worse from the mid-range than he has from three in every year of his career.
Yes, I did know that. I think that's a great stat, and I'm glad you brought it up. It was when I was doing the Finch interview and I was looking at things. That was one of the things I noticed.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because he thinks he gets fouled, and then he kind of, there's a part of him that just says, "All right, I got fouled," and he doesn't have a good sense, like Cat, of when he's really getting fouled and when he isn't.
Right. No,
he thinks he's getting fouled more than he is, and I think to some extent that deters from his contact on mid-range. Mm-hmm. And then there are also times when, like any young kid who's got a phenomenal amount of talent, sometimes he gets wound up in mano a mano,
Sure.
and will try a shot that's just slightly beyond his capability at that particular time.
And there's always a time and a place for those, right? Like,
yeah, like the end of the first half in that game where he took on 4 players and did that dipsy doodle turnaround banker. I mean, god damn.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
he can do it, but is it
boom
a normal part of his capability? No. It just, again, he enjoyed that challenge. He was going to strut that time, and I got to tell you, there are times when Ant says, I'm going to strut, where I'm endorsing it, because he's actually better than if he's just saying, all right, do I get my teammates involved now, or do I take the shot? Or,
we just like when the struts are step back threes or like pull up three,
right.
The shots that go in more often, like strut at the things that you do best. Cause all of them, he's got no range of his game that Finch or anybody's going to try and pull away from him completely.
Right.
It's let's get better at the ones that you've historically been worst at, which is the mid-range and is the lack of a floater. I mean, he really doesn't have one or hasn't through the first 3 years. So that the last thing I had down for him in like making that 30th best player to 15th best player leap is fitting into the plan, the double bigs and a more structured offense. Let that finding a way to have that style of play empower him rather than hold him back or keep him in neutral or something. And I think that's going to be the greatest test of how big this leap is, how much he improves this season, is how much he figures out how to play within the context of this team that is going to play that way, given the fact that they have Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, and this is going to be betraying my bias again, I think. But that a lot of that has to do with trust. A lot of that has to do with, do they deliver when he's in the system, when he is enabling his teammates? Does that enabling produce points? I don't think it's a D'Lo situation where D'Lo just checked out, because it wasn't working out, quote unquote. But I also think if Rudy's going to fumble the ball, or if Nas is going to travel, or if Cat is going to turn down a wide open shot for a third pass, that there are ways in which, even if Ant is being cooperative, if the team lets him down in that cooperation, again, I am still not 100% convinced that everybody in that locker room says this is Ant's team.
Yeah. I don't think so either.
Well, and that's a problem. I know that all these people, it's like when KG said what he said, it isn't whose team it is. Everybody gets together. Kumbaya. And yeah. I saw you play, KG. Come on, man. You wanted to be the alpha, and you were the alpha. It just so happened that your things to do were different.
Sure.
But if you think that KG wasn't demanding that everybody do certain things and practice a certain way, and demanding that people go a certain way on the court.
How old was KG when he started doing that? You covered him back then.
Probably 23, 24.
So,
3 or 4 years, probably third or fourth year in the league. I think he came in at 19.
Yeah. So that would be Ant's 22, and it's his fifth year.
So there you go.
So, right. That's why, I think this can still become Ant's team in the literal sense that you're talking about, or the way that so many other people do, without it being this season, because I don't feel like they are aiming for it to be that, because the accommodations of the nature of the other players just require a more egalitarian sort of setup. I think that's what it's going to feel like. Ant's going to still be like the dude, but it's not going to feel like the Dallas Mavericks and that those are Luka's team, or the Rockets when that was Harden's team or whatever. It's not, I mean, I don't think it is. And I don't think that's the end of the world. It's probably got to get there eventually, but that's always such a foofy kind of topic.
No, I understand what you're saying. I think that the reason I bring it up is because you've got a guy with a gift, and his gift is he rises to the occasion. We see it over and over again, and it has not produced anything tangible other than playoff appearances thus far, and not even a medal in the World Cup, by the way. So it still is more to the eye test than it is toward the silver and gold of trophies and medals. Sure. But Ant seems like the kind of guy that is going to mature into being somebody that you talk about a lot and game plan for first and second in that opposing locker room. And there isn't anybody else on the roster that is that way.
And that's maybe the distinction, right? I like the first and second thing. Like, I think Ant is what you game plan for first. And on this roster, what you game plan for second is not Ant, it's Cat and Rudy. And you can frame that either way. Like, you can frame that as a good thing too.
Yeah, no, I get it. And it is a passive aggressive argument we're having here. I mean, I think that we both generally see the other person's point of view and inevitably think that something is going to happen. I am just concerned that he's such a good teammate. He is such a young, mature guy. And we just got through detailing all the ways he can improve, and all that is granted. But he's already, aside from Mike Conley and perhaps Kyle Anderson, the most adult player in that locker room.
Well, that in and of itself is a passive aggressive compliment. So let's all right, but let's move on to Mike Conley.
Sure.
Year 17 for Mike Conley, who just turned 36 last week, I believe.
Yep.
With the Wolves, averaged 14 points, 3 boards, and 5 assists in 24 games for the Wolves. Shot 42% from 3, 52% from 2. Those same advanced numbers. Loved him in 92nd percentile on offense last year between Minnesota and Utah together, actually. 70th percentile on defense, which was overall a 91st percentile player. I think Mike's the type of guy who, fits into those metrics a little more snugly. That there suggests that he's better than Ant. So these are imperfect things.
Right.
But what I did want to note about those advanced numbers, and particularly the offensive one that has him top 10th percentile in the NBA, is that is a feature and not a bug. That has been true through the Utah days, through the Memphis days, that he has been an extremely efficient producer for the entirety of his career, and is, at least last season, maintained that after coming into a new setting. And the ultimate question with him is how much of that is bankable, now at 36 years old. I mean, there's a natural hesitation being that he's 36, but given the fact that he's in the context that he's 36, I'm still pretty confident in his ability to be able to maintain something very close to what he's been the past few years, barring some sort of injury. How realistic is it that Mike can maintain this level of play?
I think it's pretty realistic. I want to begin all my comments, first of all, by saying that, do you remember when we were sitting there on opening night last year and I said,
I was going to bring that up. Britt literally taps Mike Conley, falls down to the corner right in front of us. And Britt
was playing so badly.
He goes, "That dude is washed." That dude is washed.
I did. I would have defended that argument I mean, I looked for ways he was washed the rest of the game, and I found a lot of ammunition for it. In fact, I may have even mentioned it the next day or whatever,
Yeah,
but it was like, it was just, it was stunning to me that I wasn't surprised because I hadn't watched a lot of Mike Conley lately. He'd gone to Utah, which is kind of
it was like the third game of the season.
It might have even been like the second game of the season.
I think so. Yeah, it was that Utah game.
It was like, but he just looked bad. He looked slow. He looked tentative. He kind of looked like he did his first game or two when he came over, Sure. So maybe he's just somebody who needs a little, a time to get, acclimated again. NBA
or a
season.
role. I mean, according to him, when we talked to him, is like a role that empowers him. He was getting shoved into that corner spot up guy at the end his later days in Utah. And I think he kind of presumed once he got here that was what he was going to be asked to do in Minnesota. And they said, no, like our point guard in this team was D'Angelo Russell.
Right.
We need you to play offense like D'Angelo Russell. I mean, in your own way. And once that clicked in Mike's head after, I think it was like actually like 4 or 5 games, everything changed. And not just for him and his own production, but the group. I mean, that clicked into place. Then Cat gets back and the bigs click into place. And we have that 1 week where we're like, look out, Wolves got a squad. But it wasn't just Cat being back and the bigs working. It was Mike in conjunction with all that.
It is so rare to see somebody with a malleable ego, somebody whose ego will adjust according to the situation.
Yep.
I mean, Mike Conley thought, all right, I'm here as a role player in a certain way.
Yep.
And he didn't say, what the hell? I mean, I'm Mike Conley. Why am I yet again on another team? Or why shouldn't I expect these people to see what Utah didn't see? It's like he was saying, what do they want from me? I'm going to come in expecting that what they want from me is what Utah wanted from me. And that's where my ego resides right now. That's where I am not going to chafe. When was the last time Mike Conley, got resistance, got this whole idea, hey, we need to do this instead of this, or he is somebody who is, I think his self-identity is, I will take the situation presented to me and do the best I can with it. And what's phenomenal about him is he can almost always greatly improve a situation, apparently after playing a game or two. But essentially, he is
an elite cost-benefit analysis guy.
I just have I've never had a player who I just said to myself, man, if you see this guy play every day, because I watch a lot of League Pass, and I thought I knew Mike Conley, and his value, unless he just pulled some new rabbits out of his hat, which I doubt. I mean, he was just, first of all, he was the best pick and roll ball handler in terms of points per play of anybody in the NBA when he came over here. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, there isn't a player in the NBA who was more efficient handling the ball in a pick and roll situation
and shooting
than Mike Conley. Yeah. I mean, part of that was like high pick and roll with Rudy, step back three or whatever. I mean,
it was like
he hit a lot of threes.
Yeah, remember we looked that up in the media room? It was like 40-some% on
42% on threes or something on a pick and roll was a ball handler. I mean,
just like
it's just
Steph. Steph's maybe a little higher than that, but yeah.
It is the guy. It was such a brilliant trade. I thought it was a good trade at the time. I totally undervalued that trade. And actually, are we almost done on Mike? Because I got something I want to do. I want to have a little thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, can I say one more thing about Mike? I just wanted to note this for people who, aren't a League Pass person, maybe 90% of the Mike Conley that you've ever watched was those 24 games last season. One thing I would put onto people's radars is the floater is, and that's not like a deep cut or anything, but the floater is a
floater.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting about it too. He's a little ambidextrous there, but that will be a real weapon. He just missed a bunch of them right when he got here last season. I was looking it up today. Like he only
was
shot
0 for 6 in like his second game here.
I know. And so you look at the numbers of that floater range, and he was like 40%, which isn't very, it's better than that, but like not very good. Right. Historically, that's not been the case. I went through it today. Previous 5 seasons, like 45% in that range. And that is super important, particularly playing with Rudy Gobert, because there are these times where in pick and roll, the defense is going to stick to the big, and a lot with Rudy, right? And you get kind of caught in that in between area, and a lot of good guards are kind of garbage once it gets to there.
Right.
And this isn't to say Tyus Jones is garbage, but I was thinking about this example because he actually totally changed us about his game in Memphis. I wonder if you remember this. Maybe it was me and Jace would joke about this. Like the reason Tyus Jones, when he's on the Wolves, like led the league in assist to turnover ratio, was because he'd get into the middle of the floor and like nobody to pass to it. He would just take, like, he'd be like, rather than making this really hard pass that might get picked off, I'm just going to take this floater that's probably not going to go in. And then it just counts as a missed shot and not a turnover. What made Tyus so much better in Memphis is he became like a high 40% floater guy with the Grizzlies. And that, by having that in your bag, your turnovers go down. You're more of a weapon for that lob threat to the big, because they got to come up on you. Like Tyus Jones became Mike Conley. Like that's what he became in Memphis in that element of the game. And I think Mike Conley gets back to that. And it sounds kind of in the weeds, but within the context of what we know Mike's job is, which is so much of like, yeah, Rudy's going to be a role player this year, but Mike, we need you to be like the one that keeps him in the mix here too.
Right.
And to have that in his game is part of the reason why I think they were such a great pick and roll combination in Utah in those years. And I think we see that comeback this season. That it's hard to take any of Mike's numbers and be like, they're going to be better than they were last year. But that's one I found. I found one there. Yeah. That's all I got on Conley. Give me your next thing.
Okay. Well, it was just an exercise. I was just thinking about, I knew we were going to talk about the guards today. And I just thought to myself, where does the Wolves backcourt rank in the NBA? And it's between top 5 and top 10.
Do you have a? I mean, you have.
I do.
You didn't prep me for this, so yeah.
No. I didn't prep you. I mean, I'll give you the ones that I think are no-brainers that they're worse, and there aren't that many. Drew Holiday and Jaylen Brown in Boston, obviously. Booker and Beal in Phoenix, obviously.
Okay.
Then some would say Luka and Kyrie, obviously, but I don't know. I mean, that's one. I could.
But we'll do a more objective. Like, yeah, let's put that there.
I'm conceding that. I would concede the ones. I think that even without Ja, Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane, that's a really interesting place. I gave the Memphis the edge on that. And I also SGA and Giddey. That's a real interesting. Yeah. I think SGA is better than Ant right now. Giddey and Conley, I think, is an interesting argument.
Be a weird argument.
Exactly. That's what makes it so weird. So I've just mentioned Boston, Memphis, OKC, Phoenix, and Dallas. And you could throw Garland and Donovan Mitchell maybe into Cleveland. I don't know. And then the other one where I put the arrow upward, but I could be talked out of it, is Chris Paul and Steph Curry in Golden State.
Yeah. Right. What about I get you were just doing the locks there, just again off the top of my head.
Yeah.
De'Aaron Fox
and Kevin Huerter. Yeah, that was one on my question marks.
I put Ant and Conley above it, but I'm just.
I have 4 question marks. I think the question marks are really interesting, and we can also talk about the locks that I don't necessarily agree are locks.
So that was 7 that you had as
Boston, Memphis, OKC, Phoenix, Dallas, and then Cleveland and Golden State. I think those are debatable, quite frankly. And I think that Fox and Herter is debatable. I think Maxey and Harden is debatable in Philly.
Yeah, that's talk about weird.
Exactly. And Westbrook and Paul George, I think that's debatable on the Clippers. And then the last one I think is debatable is Halliburton and Bruce Brown in Indiana.
Yeah, I think Ant and Conley deserve to be, or my opinion would be pretty clearly, I would put Ant and Conley above Fox and Herter, above Harden and Maxey, above Westbrook and PG, above Halliburton and Brown. I would take Curry and Chris Paul, though.
Okay. All right. And what about Kyrie and Luka? And what about Garland and Donovan Mitchell?
The Garland and Donovan Mitchell one is probably the closest one in my head. Again, not with having a ton of time to think about this. I'll say the reason I'm taking Golden State for sure, and the reason I'm taking Dallas for sure is Curry and Luka. I think are like I think Luka's going to win MVP this year. Like I mean, that's where my mind is at with where Luka is at in his career.
But you understand we're going both ways, though. I mean, Luka's a black hole on defense.
Yeah, no, I do. I still think I'm going to give Luka and Kyrie and CP and Curry that, but I could be convinced over Garland and Mitchell, which that's a high bar too. That's not like that's
exactly. Well, that's what I mean. When I thought originally they're easily top 10, and it turns out that I have convinced myself they are top 10.
Right.
But I thought, after a while, I was thinking they might be top 5, and then I found 5 that I really. If somebody put me to the wall, I would agree there are 5 better. Also, Schroeder and
no, come on.
Well, Toronto. I mean, they got Scotty Barnes. And,
no.
I know.
The other one I would take over, or I would have Ant and Conley over Smart and Bane. But if you
put John Bane in there,
if you weave in 55 games of Ja into that, then okay. Then we can. Then you.
Well, and if you're talking 3-headed monsters, if you threw Clay into the Paul and Curry because he's not a small forward, he bumps down, or you threw Bane, Ja, and Smart, who are probably going to play a lot when everybody's healthy together, because Bane can switch. I mean. Smart can switch 1 through 4. You want him on defense, even when you have 2 quote unquote smalls on the floor. So, I mean, it's another interesting argument if you're talking point guard trios, because, what does that mean? Do you kick, Jaden McDaniels down to the 3 or have Nah be the 3 or, again, it does hurt the Wolves case though. I think the top 2 is the bigger argument simply because.
And the stronger argument for the Wolves.
Right.
I could get as high as the only 4 I'm for sure taking over the Wolves is Boston, Phoenix, Dallas, and Golden State for me personally.
Okay. I think Golden's OKC is, SGA is in that conversation you're talking about. I think he's a top 12 player.
Yeah. And I think I would put Steph and Luka in the top half of the top 12, top 6 guys.
Yeah. If you're asking me who is going to play better this year, Steph Curry or SGA, if you want one guy on your roster for the entire year, I think that's a fascinating conversation.
I'm taking Curry.
Yeah. All right. I think that.
And that's no SGA shit.
I know. I just, first of all, I'm not sure his health will permit it. Secondly, I do think that his defense is sporadic. And I think that he's a great rebounder. Curry. I'll give him that. Curry, yeah. I mean, and let's face it, nobody spaces the floor like him. You have a great argument. I'm just saying it's an interesting argument. And
look at you bringing topics to the pod.
I know, first time ever, I think. Actually, there was a time where I compared Ant and Wiggins. First 2 years in the league.
I do remember that. Is that the same episode?
You can count them on one hand,
That might have been the episode where you said, I'd rather have McDaniels for the rest of his career.
No, that was a different episode. Yeah. I mean, and again, they are hot topics, but they're not embarrassing topics to me.
No.
I mean, I just like, I mean, the one that everybody thinks I'm going to be embarrassed on this year is I think OKC is going to be better than Phoenix,
You do.
And I thought that was a lot more clear cut before they got Nurkic and then those two wings that give them some depth. And now a little bit of stubbornness that I'm going to hold to it, but I think it's still very, very close. And I'm going to guess that OKC wins one or two more games than Phoenix.
I'm going to grab a quick ad break here, and it's an ad for us or for the podcast. Two things. If you are interested in being an advertiser on the show this season, we normally get a lot of inquiries like right at this time of year, and it's like we're busy. So if you are interested in working with us for an advertising role, reach out to DaneMooreProductions at gmail.com. DaneMooreProductions at gmail.com. It's in the show notes if you want to look this up. That's one. And then number two, if any of you, I get a lot of people that reach out and be like, oh, I want to support the pod, but I don't live in Minnesota. I can't patronize sponsor X. If you want to directly contribute to the show, just kind of helps us with operating and expenses, and that sort of thing with YouTube and some more of the stuff that we're doing. You can go to patreon.com/DaneMooreMBA. Again, that just helps us be able to, some of this stuff costs money, traveling to games and that sort of deal costs some money. It's all hopefully stuff. I think you can feel confident that that money is only going to go to enhancing the product that we're doing. So that's patreon.com/DaneMooreMBA. Also, again, in the show notes, both the email address and the link to the Patreon there. All right, Britt, Shake Milton. Year 6 for Shake. He just turned 27. Obviously, his first season not on the Sixers. He averaged 8 points, 3 boards, and 3 assists last year in 21 minutes per game. Shot 52% from 2-point range, which seems like just about every single one of these guards shot exactly 52% from 2-point range. And Shake shot 38% from 3, albeit I always like to mention he was not a high volume 3-point shooter.
I like his shot, though.
Contest.
His shot looks like and it looks like he can hit the corner.
They're hammering that with him. That like it's a rewind. I mean, that was just a different system, different style of play in Philly. He played the James Harden role, man. Like going back and watching it, like, you go to like Basketball Reference, you do game score, whatever. Some game, I watched a couple of his full games that he really produced. They were games that Harden didn't play in, and they let Shake do it. Like that was the role that he played in here. I think that overlaps some with Ant, right? Like he can be the second unit or the, if Ant rolls an ankle or whatever, and, someone steps in, I think Shake could do that in the way that he did for Harden last season. But they want him to be more than that. That's all Philly ever really asked him to be, and never really anything consistently. To be a consistent contributor in a meaningful way to this rotation, he's got to be more, right? And one way he can be more, or one way he can get on the floor with Ant or with Conley or whatever it might be, is to be a more what is that? A more willing 3-point shooter, right? He's kind of like I'm going to take it. I'm not a shooter. Like he's right. But he was more looking to get downhill, at least from what I've watched of him. So I think that's sort of a pivot point on him. But the main thing is like, be a playmaker. It's really like, that's his game, is the bench version of one of those big guards who can get to the bucket and can, distribute some to his teammates. We've heard it from Tim Connolly. We've heard it from Chris Finch. They were very drawn to Shake Milton this summer. Finch is very excited about having that type of role player on this team. Why do you think they feel that way, or how do you feel they want to fold Shake Milton into this thing?
Well, two things that I've heard from them. One was a surprise to me, and one was very much expected. They want to be more physical. And that dude is a rock. I mean, he's a big dude. If he plays the point, he's like a 6'5" shortstop. You know what I mean? He's a 6'5" point guard,
and he has a 7'1" wingspan.
Yeah. And so you have a situation where fighting through screens or even trying to set a screen on the guy. There's some people forget that, you know, NBA players play 82 games a season, and or is it 81? 81 games a season, whatever it is.
They do not play 81 games, man. Come on. You know how many games there are in a season? It's 82. You're thinking, I don't know, is that half a baseball? It's 82. Yes.
Could be. Anyway, bottom line is you get run into people a lot. And it's just part of the game. Everybody accepts it, so on and so forth. But I think a dirty little secret among players, just by the way I watch players play, is that there are times when running into somebody or getting run into is harder to do than it is at other times. Maybe it's cold outside or a bad flight, or you're playing more minutes than you used to, or you
played yesterday and your shoulder hurts from that other
running into like 3 different physical teams in a row or whatever. But the Wolves on occasion just weren't physically rugged enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what Finch is talking about, right? When the identity, and we talked about all defense.
And that's what I'm saying about that aspect of why they got him isn't a surprise. If you want to get more physical on the perimeter and not play with just a bunch of enforcers, you know, then Shake Milton is a really nice guy to have on that team. You know, he's a big, rangy dude who can do a lot of skill things, but he can also just, he can, if you're going to set a screen and he's chasing the ball handler out on the perimeter, you better bet, you're going to get hit, and even if it's not enough of a hit to warrant him getting a foul, he's big enough that's going to rattle you a little bit. So it's going to be something where, you've done your job setting a screen on Shake Milton, but you're also not going to like it. And so that's part of physical basketball. And that's, you can tell the teams, I mean, it was obviously more prominent in the Pat Riley, Jeff Van Gundy era, where, you had people just beating each other up on, but I think that the physicality, obviously, just to boil it back down to one word, that's one reason they got him. And then the other is Finch in the interview went out of it. I mean, apropos of nothing, brought him up first time he was brought up in the conversation was, I think that he can play really well with Rudy and unlock Rudy in certain ways. I'm going, whoa, what? I mean, I have no idea why. I mean, I'm still not totally clued in as to why. Maybe we'll figure it out as the season goes on. But
I think part of it is, having watched film of him playing with Embiid.
Right.
And like a lot, I mean, Embiid plays from the mid-range so much. Like even he's like a pick and pop into mid-range often, or kind of slow roll into that area.
If he goes to the rim, it's because he's got the ball in his hands. He doesn't usually camp down there like Rudy does.
Yeah, I mean, but I think obviously situationally, that happened last year where Shake found Embiid underneath the basket, and that was really productive. Not to put words in Chris Finch's mouth, but if you're asking the question, I think that's some of what it is, and kind of having the size and the length to pass late, right? Like Kyle Anderson.
Passing late is a huge. Yeah, I mean, Finch talks about passing late as being an important thing for Gobert, because again, you're trying to negotiate these things with Gobert. If he does all the work and then doesn't get rewarded, and he is open, and one of the reasons he's not getting rewarded is because you don't know when to pull the trigger, like Mike Conley does, like Kyle Anderson does. Well, he's saying like Shake Milton does. I think. I mean, that would be but I haven't seen a lot of it. But then again, they haven't played all together that much on the court yet.
Well, I really do think size and length is the thing that allows you to pass late. Jordan McLaughlin is a pass early guy. That's why he works really well with a fast, hard rolling big in Naz Reid.
Right.
J-Max 5'10", and he can't pass late if he gets down there. And that's the difference. That's why Mike Conley has kind of figured out it. He said it took him a year how to do that with Rudy. Kyle gets that, another pseudo point guard on this team.
Right.
Shake
6'9",
does.
right.
And Nikhil kind of does too.
Yeah. Right.
Like, and it's also in the late, it's the drop off last minute to Rudy. Maybe that's in part a product of those two having played together in Utah some as well. But theoretically, Shake fits into that, which on top of his individual scoring and playmaking, maybe there is some playmaking for Rudy. Though I'm wondering how that's going to work rotationally, that those two will be on the floor much. But, who knows, right? The whole roster's healthy, or other than Jaden, I don't know what's going on there.
Well, I just know that when I did the Finch interview last year, he went out of his way to talk about Kyle Anderson and how important Kyle Anderson was going to be. And there wasn't quite the same amount of ardor this time, but there was I am very confident that Shake Milton will not be out of the rotation. If they're playing 8 guys, he will be one of the guys playing.
Yeah.
I mean,
9.
I think 8 even. Wow. I think that, I think he's one of those guys that I actually feel like they may have as much confidence or more confidence in him running an offense as Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
I think I agree with that.
And that's, I would not have thought that going into this season. Mm-hmm. I actually think that Nickeil is a little bit more of a risk taker on offense. And I actually think, I still would probably prefer, if I'm having a point guard,
sure,
and I have my choices, Shake or Nickeil, I would probably still go with Nickeil. But Finch has an idea that he thinks that, he's excited about this. And if we're looking past this year, there's going to be a Kyle Anderson role if Kyle Anderson doesn't get re-signed. And if he gets re-signed, it'll be kind of a surprise at this point. So anyway, I think that Shake Milton's got to feel really good about signing this contract, because I think he's with an organization that wants to develop him, and he's playing, he probably got market rate, I think, for, I don't think any team is going to pay him more than he got paid. But I also think he could earn every penny.
Yeah, it's a team kind of like, in a weird way, similar to Mike Conley when we were talking about once I got him last year. It's a team that we think wants to empower the player to do the most of their things. I think that's how they feel about Shake. Let's quickly hit on J-Mac and Wendell Moore Jr. J-Mac, year 5 for him, 27 years old, 3 points, 1 board, 3 assists, and 16 minutes per game. Last season, 55% from 2, 31% from 3. Obviously, a season derailed by a calf injury, and then derailed again by a calf re-injury. He is still, though, the only true point guard on this roster outside of Mike Conley. Obviously, Tim Conley, since he's been here, has made roster adjustments. So J-Mac isn't the only backup point guard option on this team yet. I'm kind of surprised by the vibe out of camp, how J-Mac feels like he is at least in that fringe of the rotation group. Like he wasn't playing against Maccabi,
that's right,
the other night. Like he is in that. The way I wrote it down here is just above Troy Brown Jr. and just below Shake Milton in the pecking order, which I think is 10th in the pecking order of this team. Not an insignificant role, but I was sitting there this morning like I don't even know what I'd think about J-Mac for this year. Like, what is it going to look like between coming off of injury and kind of being confused of what player he was last year versus like the good player he was a couple years ago when they're playing a completely different style of play. I don't know. Like, I don't know what my expectations are for Jordan McLaughlin this season. Where are you at on him?
I think that I can't imagine a player as diametrically opposed in terms of pace to Gobert than Jordan McLaughlin. I just think that I think
he's never going to play with him. He'll never play.
He's a hair on fire guy. And I mean, that's the way I would love to see this team play. I like, fly around at both ends of the court. McLaughlin is great at filling passing lanes, anticipating, poke checking, all the things that you do when everybody's amped. If your teammates are amped, if you get a poke check steal and everybody is set in a drop coverage, more likely than not, a teammate is going to go, an opposing teammate is going to go get that ball. Mm-hmm. Or if you are running a secondary fast break, you're not going to have guys on either side of you as you're flying down the court. And therefore, you're going to have somebody challenging your pull-up, and you're not going to pull up. It's just, I don't think the circumstances fit his style nearly as well as they did a year or two ago. And I am legitimately curious. I was a guy who mocked people who liked him on Twitter before I had seen only a couple of games of his and had to eat crow because he was a lot better than that and was clearly wrong. And then got so involved. I loved him. I loved him. And
involved.
What I felt like is that, can he be the net rating whisperer that he was previously? Good things used to always happen when he was on the court. And maybe the calf injury made him like a wounded animal out there, and everybody thought, now we can take that son of a bitch off the dribble even more. Yeah. But they were taking him off the dribble last year, and they were leaving him open for shots. And he got to the point where he was always a pass-first guy, and he realized that he needed to hit some shots to rebalance that equation. Yeah. And I think that messed with his head a little bit.
When LeBron picked him up in the play-in game and just threw his shot like 3 times in the third. Yeah, that would mess with my head.
That was the nadir. It wasn't just that game. He was driving into coverage and nobody was, they
finally got a scout out on him.
They were casually blocking his shots all over the place. And so which is it? I've yo-yoed on the guy, and now I'm kind of in a suspended animation.
That's what I'm at too.
Slightly on. I feel like I want to see Shake Milton and Nickeil Alexander-Walker run the point capably, so that it's a moot point with J-Mac. Not anything against J-Mac. I'm just thinking,
that'd be best
if you can keep that size and you can keep that unity, and let that guy go to Sacramento and become the De'Aaron Fox backup, and then with that team or something like that, there are ways in which J-Mac could become the goods again for a team.
It just needs to be in the hair on fire type role. And that's the one.
I just love to watch him play that way. He was, think about him and Prince and Nas and Ant and, the Iowa Ants. And essentially they would fly around, Jalen Noel. Everybody had fun, and they went on some of the most euphoric runs I've seen out of Timberwolves basketball in the last decade. It's just wonderful, wonderful play.
I know what you mean, but some people are like, "What?"
Well, they need to go to the more amateur Wolves podcast.
The thing I want to when I think of Jordan McLaughlin is there's going to be a time again with injuries this season where the rotation just has to shift, right? And I think the rotation. And this could be a number of different guys are hurt, and it just shifts the way you have to play to the point where you have a second unit that is running and going and playing that style of play, probably with Nas as a main piece, and that maybe Ant, filtering into that second unit, and that might determine how good J-Mac's season is. For those 3 weeks, Can you deliver that which you were 2 seasons ago with Taurean Prince and Naz Reid and Jalen Noel and Anthony Edwards and that type of group? Can you find that again when this team needs it? If he can do that, well worth
his value skyrockets. Value skyrockets.
Well worth $2.4 million or whatever.
And keep him around. I mean, I like the guy. I think I've just seen the highs and the lows, and I'm befuddled as to what combination of highs and lows we will get this year.
And there might come a time this season where Naz feels really out of rhythm within the style of which they're playing, and it's maybe
I don't think there's a maybe about that.
Yeah, it's probably going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But J-Mac low key could be like something that re-inspires Naz if you feel like you need that, right?
Absolutely. Those two guys. I mean, if you talk about the most potent twosome,
the most potent undrafted twosome.
But I mean, also, Naz has he's the opposite of Gobert in that if the ball is around his waist when he's on the move, it's perfect for him.
Yeah.
That pocket pass. I mean, Naz would have thrived with Jeff Teague.
and D'Lo was that way too.
Exactly.
There's those different types of point guard. The D'Lo, Teague.
Right.
Not Naz.
Whereas Jeff Teague played with Gobert, I mean, it would have been awful.
Yes,
Chris Paul and Gobert, it would be a monster. He's a great lobber. Great lobber. Gobert will thrive.
Last guy, Wendell Moore Jr. Year 2 for Wendell Moore. He's 22 years old. Only year 2, but almost the exact same age as Anthony Edwards. He was their first-round pick a year ago, granted a late first-round pick. He did not have a role on last season's team. It doesn't seem like he will have a role on this year's team. Me and Jace talked about this a little bit yesterday because we found a way to talk about that 4th preseason game somehow for 15 minutes. And Wendell came up because he started, and I think he was probably the most highly drafted player on the floor in that game. Yeah, first-round pick. I think, is the only guy who was a first-round pick who played in that game. And yet again, did not do anything to stand out in that performance, which has also been the case in his 2 summer league stints. I understand that those might not be, that's not a very big sample size, nor a very meaningful sample size, a couple summer leagues and a couple preseason games, but he's yet to flash anything outside of that one game where he got started in a pinch and did a good job guarding Ja Morant. Hasn't had a ton of opportunity, but also doesn't feel like he's done a lot to warrant opportunity.
Well, that's the thing when you say, small sample size. Well, whose fault is that? I mean, the guy
particularly on a team that was decimated, was playing. I mean, how many total minutes did Bryn Forbes, Jalen Noel, and Austin Rivers play last season? I mean, that has to be almost, I don't know, like 1,300 minutes. Wendell didn't ever. Like, there is an opportunity there to play guard on last season's team, and he didn't take that. Sorry, I cut you off.
The statement people use who want to defend Wendell Moore is he gets better when he's around better personnel.
Yeah, that's what I say.
He meshes, And what I say to myself is, he's a stronger weak link, but also what that means is he's got to be one of the top 5 players on the floor to be maximized effective. I mean, or he's got to be one of the top 6 or 7 or 8. You're not going to throw your 10th man on the floor, and that's being very generous. I'd say he's about 17th right now, frankly. But you don't put them out there with your 4 or 5 best guys because you will invite the other team to totally ignore all the things he can't do.
Yeah.
And I'm on record, and this, he'll be in good company. I mean, I once said that Naz Reid probably should get cut from the roster or something, or something like that. It isn't, this isn't the death knell for somebody, but I don't think these should be resigned. I think that, I was talking about this with John Krasinski the other day, and John was arguing worst case scenario, he's like your 13th man, and he's a good dude, practices hard, good in the locker room.
Yeah.
And my argument again is, well, there's got to be somebody who's upside. Aren't you trying to develop somebody? I just don't know. In some ways, his temperament and his work ethic and all the things about him makes it worse, because he's doing everything possible right now to be better. It isn't like he's not committing to the program. It isn't like he's not doing things. At the end of the day, I think he just simply is not good enough to play in the NBA. And I'm reminded of something I told you. You told me to remember, and I'm just now remembering it, which is that what is Chris Finch's word when he likes a player?
Fearless.
He calls them fearless. Wendell Moore is fearful. Wendell Moore is fearful because he's smart. He knows that he doesn't have enough of the game to flash something that he needs to flash. So he doesn't do it. I mean, he doesn't, if he sees a little seam in the defense, he doesn't immediately take somebody off the dribble, because he's not going to be able to finish there. Or many, pick your thing. It isn't that he's bad at anything. He's probably he'd probably do pretty well in Iowa, and he'll probably do well overseas if that's where he winds up. But I just don't see the future in him. Yeah. I mean, he reminds me of a lot of people who came and went on a lot of bad Wolves teams over the years. Guys that are now footnotes that, if you mention somebody from like the 95 team, you get a chuckle from some old timer. Oh yeah, I remember, that guy.
Right.
Andre Guibert or somebody,
It's getting kind of Culvery, right?
Yeah. Although I will say that Culver was just such a terrible shooter. And also also what I will say about Culver is, I think that the fact that he was a preacher's son from Lubbock, Texas, who stayed in town to star for his local college team meant that, there is a way in which you need a little bit of cosmopolitan seasoning to fit into the NBA. And I think that is something that was against Culver that Wendell Moore doesn't have to deal with. I feel like Wendell Moore has a good sense of life around him and will not retreat to his roots.
And he's a way better shooter. That's a good point. I don't know about that. And then just the last thing with Wendell, because this is time relevant, is we're
coming up on it, right? Yeah, he's going to get signed. Everybody tells me, anybody who knows anything about the Wolves, it'll be very, very surprising if he isn't signed. So
it's extremely rare that a first-round pick doesn't get their third-year option picked up. There's a short list of that. Those are major busts that they don't, and that's because the option's one so cheap. You've invested in developing this player. Really, the only guys who don't is guys on good teams who that team really just values that roster spot, and like, we're too good of a team to have a guy who's maybe not ready to NBA contribute. And that's the question: is, are the Wolves at that level? It's not an expensive option on Wendell Moore Jr. It's $2.5 million for next season, when a minimum is going to be like $2.2 million. So it's not like a cap hit thing. It's just, do you want him on this? Do you want him to have one of the roster spots for next season? So they need to make that decision by October 31st for next year. That's how it works on the.
Let me ask you something. Since we're in guards, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You got to cut one. You got to keep one.
Oh, boy.
Wendell Moore and Knicks.
Oh man, you know that I like Dacian Nix. Dacian Nix, you look at numbers, and a million turnovers in Houston, didn't shoot the ball well. I'm what, I always say this, for like a minimum level player, you need to show me one skill that is for sure an NBA skill. I'm not sure I know what that is for Wendell Moore or Dacian Nix. I think for Dacian Nix, it's probably being a true point guard in the sense of getting it like J-Max style, effectively getting your team into offense and also being able to guard opposing ones. I think Dacian Nix has a chance to be able to do that, though I'm not stamping that as a for sure NBA skill with him. I don't know what it is for Wendell Moore Jr. Like, I don't even know what the leader in the locker room of his locker room is to be, or the clubhouse. How do I say that? The clubhouse, for his top NBA skill or clear cut NBA skill. So yeah, honestly, for me, it would be the both toys cost 25 cents. I'll take the shiny new one. I'll take Dacian Nix. Yeah.
All right. So again, I have nothing personally against Wendell Moore. In fact, I've been impressed with what he did in Duke, where he made himself into something. And his first summer league game, I raved about on Twitter because it was actually the highlight of what I've ever seen from him, but I didn't know it at the time. And he has put together at least a 2-year NBA career, So, hats off to him in that respect. But if we're talking about, this is a big boy league and you've got to help a team or fall off by the wayside, I would cut my losses.
I will say it would be really cool. It's one of those situations where clearly we're both share a mind on this and have a strong opinion on it. It would be one of those situations where it'd be like kind of interesting to be wrong too. Like I'd be interested to see and I'm cheering for this for the kid, like that he does find a way and a path in the NBA and at least one clear cut NBA skill. I'm just saying, like, the interested person in me would be like, wait, what did I miss there? And what is it?
Exactly.
So I'm cheering for that for him.
I do remember when I'm wrong more than when I'm right. Maybe it's because it's more frequent. I don't know. But essentially, at the end of the day, I want to remind myself for exactly that reason. If you're right all the time, you begin to get perhaps an overinflated sense of how much you know. Whereas if you're wrong, you get a sharpening. All right, I need to lean in a little harder on aspects. I mean, I know now that one of the things I don't like is somebody who just really stands out as a bad defender every now and then, which is where a lot of my Nas problem came from, and the falling down early, and also, quite frankly, just there's a lot of flash in his game. Even early on, there was that, aspect. And I don't like more flash than substance. I'm not a Zach LaVine guy, for example, who's a terrible defender, always has been. I mean, he is.
Yeah.
And so,
catching strays here in the Wendell Moore section.
Well, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that I was also, as a result of that, though, I undervalued what Zach LaVine could become, even with, he has proven me right that he is a bad NBA defender, but I also thought he was totally lacking in court IQ on offense, which he was. But the fact that he couldn't play defense made me think he'll never get that much better on offense. In other words, I was soured on the guy. And when you sour on people, you have a tendency to overlook things, And so I would love to say a year from now, I'm soured on Wendell Moore Jr. And the reason I missed his ability to be the middle guy in transition, or to be somebody who's rediscovered, drive and kick game, or you found a way to be of value to the team. If that happens, I'm going to say I was wrong and point out why.
Yeah, same. I want that to happen. I want that to happen. I actually just like personally, the interactions that I've had with him, like I enjoy talking to him. Like I enjoy talking to Wendell. Seems like a
him and Minot are kind of like, the Bobsey twins,
Okay. Last thing, because I was thinking I a week from today, next Thursday, if that's when you're on next, there will already have been a Wolves game, and I'm sure you'll probably put this in your season preview, but do you want to just put a win total and a seed guess prediction for?
Well, I mean, what I'm thinking of now is probably from 46 to 48 and 5th.
You know what I have it down right here?
What?
47 and 5th.
Really? Interesting. See,
I'm not going to show you my notes, but it's written out here.
Yeah. I just.
And to be clear, that wasn't my guess for what that might have been actually what my guess would have, but that is my prediction.
And also, and you and I both know that, or maybe I'll just say it out loud, this is the hardest conference to pick from 3 to 12 that I've ever seen. If the Wolves finish 3rd or if the Wolves finish 12th, I will be surprised but not shocked.
Right.
I mean, there are ways in which this team will have to be better than last year. If last year's team played this year, from what I can see lining up, they would miss the play-in. They need to be better.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a better conference. And on the other hand, what happens if the graybeards in the Clippers, the Lakers, the Warriors, all these teams, what happens if all those guys fall off? What happens if the injury bug hits the Suns? What happens if what we saw out of the Sacramento and OKC doesn't translate? I mean, there's questions all over the place. What happens if Dylan Brooks, gone for good, and Ja Morant, gone for 25 games, does really ding the identity of the Grizzlies? What happens if losing Bruce Brown and Jeff Green really does kill that second unit in Denver?
Yeah. Oh boy, we've lost Britt again. Right here at the end of the episode, but we do have Britt's.
I mean,
oh, there you go. You're back. You're back. I'm not editing.
I'm back. All right, good. Yeah, I did. I saw the little circles and we went away too. Oh, you froze again. Are you still there? All right, good. You're there. You're back.
I'm there. I'm here.
All right. Anyway,
wrap us up.
Bottom line, I'm going to call 5th because I think they'll avoid the play-in.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have fewer question marks. I think they have a deeper team than a lot of other teams that might be better than them, in terms of proven identity and going along. I am saying this also, saying that I do not think that the Gobert Cat thing is going to work ever as well as anybody wants it to. I think they will overcompensate for that with ways, and I think they'll compensate for that in ways that are going to make it so that it won't be as much of an issue as it could be.
Yeah, I think what we're predicting is an expected value of this team, not an actual prediction. Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense, and that's why I want to be solidly pro without being. I'm not gushing about this team. I actually had more confidence in last year's team because I didn't know how bad it was going to go until the the final preseason game. Yeah. But I mean, and that fly around team, that will always be, dear to my heart. This isn't a team that I love, but this is a team that my head likes.
Yeah. And that's why, and 47 and 5 seed is giving praise. 47 is
absolutely
over. Yeah. 40, that is the over by a decent chunk.
Right.
And to say the 5th in a low.
And I would even, put 48. And I got to tell you that everybody I talked to, and did you read Hollinger? Hollinger has them tied for 3rd.
I haven't read it yet, but I saw it was tied for 4th, right?
Tied for 3rd. Well, I mean, 3rd, 4th is a tie.
Yeah.
They and Phoenix are tied for the third best record behind Memphis and Denver. In fact, Hollinger, it kind of angered me because a lot of the things that Hollinger thinks, he doesn't like OKC, so there's that. But I mean, about the Wolves and in general, I find myself agreeing with him a lot, and I can't stand it when I come to things independently and then somebody I respect comes to the same thing before I've had a chance to write it.
Well, you didn't seem too pissed about me having 47-5 as well. So
well, I mean, that's a little bit of a ratification. That's different. You've seen this team forever. I'm just thinking a guy who parachutes in,
Right.
and just, oh yeah. I mean, what he said, and I know you want to wrap it up, and we will in a second.
I don't care.
But essentially, the Hollinger thing that made me jealous, because I was going to write something very similar to this and probably still will. But now everybody at least will know that, at least I'm saying that I'm not ripping it off. It's just something I also came to. He mentioned that Anthony Edwards had the worst true shooting percentage on that World Cup team. And I think that is an interesting element of the whole Anthony Edwards experience that people have a tendency to downgrade, is this idea that when you talk about Ant as a superstar, you are still talking about a guy with some significant flaws that have to be accounted for. It doesn't mean you'd like him less, but it does mean that if you're honestly evaluating a team, you have to understand how are they going to either compensate for this or fold this into the package. And that's, one of the things I would say that goes triple for Gobert and even for Cat, double for Cat. So,
you know what, it just reminds me of, Britt? Like, we get the outlandish MJ comps for Ant all the time, and I'm like, why isn't it Kobe? Why isn't it Kobe? Because I think from a
much more Kobe than MJ.
Yeah, from just and obviously such high bars, but just the archetype of the player in the great things he does. I mean, Kobe as a defender too is an elite defender in the way that
but also a challenged great defender.
Yes, and then it's the perhaps over reliance. I mean, that was the whole narrative around Kobe, is analytics are burbling up there at the end of his career when he's the best player, and some people are like, oh well, hold on, the true shooting percentage, blah blah blah, the nerdy stuff that's overblown and all that, because when you're in that role, you need to take on more. It's just, it always strikes me as, if we're making outlandish comparisons to connect the dot, my head goes to Kobe more than
and if you go to the Basketball Reference page, one of the things I kind of like about it, for each team, they give you a photo of the top career WAR of everybody from 1 to 12. Ant's not on that list. Cat is second to KG.
Yeah.
And so, that is a fallacy of analytics. So you can't put a sticker on a number and say, there it is. And Ant obviously is one of the 12 best players in franchise history. No questions asked.
Yeah.
But there are some analytics things that point to flaws that are there.
And I wouldn't even call them flaws. I would just call it low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Well, if that's the positive way to look at it.
Yeah, it is the positive way to look at it. But at 22, I think he deserves that, that benefit of the doubt. And he's growing up in a very different time in the NBA, where the coaches are trying to trim that fat or pick that fruit, whatever we want to say it, in ways that didn't happen in the 90s with Michael and didn't happen in the early 2000s with Kobe. Ant should have a more efficient blueprint of play, which I think analytically that's going to make things come around, but he's gonna have to learn that, and that's going to be growth. And at 22, sure, he's still figuring that out, and still great a player.
And two great quotes. Chris Finch on Anthony Edwards, a perfect blend of confidence and coachability.
Love it.
And Anthony Edwards on Chris Finch, I fuck with Finchy. Which means, he's my guy, And so, you can't, when your head coach and your star player are sincerely praising each other in absolutely the right lexicon for their idea of praise, then you're living well.
Yeah, it's an ideal spot to be in. When can we expect the season preview?
I don't know. I'm going to turn it in on Monday, and so they'll either run it NBA opener day Tuesday or Wolves opener day Wednesday.
Sweet. That's crazy that next time we do a pod, the season will have been started.
Yep, and we'll either be talking about Toronto or Miami.
Oh, I bet you we talk about both. He's Britt Robson. Follow him on Twitter at Britt Robson. And again, if you enjoyed this episode, I mean, me and Britt have done a lot of episodes over the past 4 or 6 weeks, but specifically we did something similar with the wings and similar with the bigs. So check that out back in your feed. Until tomorrow with Kyle, he's Britt, I'm Dane.
Nobody's gonna get it for me. How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Grinning hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah. Hope you dancing like